I was 68 years old the first time my daughter looked at my checkbook and decided it belonged to her. Mom. You're draining our future. Sarah snapped, crossing her arms over her expensive cashmere sweater. I sat at my kitchen table, my hands resting on the glossy brochure for a custom sunroom. For 40 years, I worked as a pediatric nurse, pulling double shifts, so my late husband Arthur and I could pay off this 4-bedroom house in Ohio. Since Arthur passed away 5 years ago, the house had felt too quiet, too dark. I finally decided to spend a fraction of my retirement savings on a glass sunroom overlooking the backyard. I hadn't asked for Sarah's permission, but she had let herself in with her spare key, spotted the contractor's estimate on the counter, and immediately summoned her husband, Greg. Now, they were both standing in my kitchen staging an intervention over my own money. Sarah is right. Lorraine Gregg chimed in, adjusting his designer watch. A sunroom. That's nearly $30,000. We have the twins' college funds to think about. We rely on your stability. Stability. That was their word for wallet. I looked at Sarah. She was 34, driving a luxury SUV she couldn't afford, living in a neighborhood with HOA fees higher than my first mortgage. I looked at Greg, who golfed twice a week at a private club while complaining about inflation. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just studied the two healthy, capable adults standing in my home lecturing me about financial responsibility. You feel I'm draining your future? I asked softly. We're just asking you to be sensible, Mom. Sarah sighed, rolling her eyes as if dealing with a toddler. Keep the money where it belongs. For the family. I slowly closed the brochure and slid it into my drawer. I understand completely, Sarah. You're right. They both relaxed, exchanging a smug glance. They thought they had won. They didn't realize they had just cut their own safety net to shreds. After they left, the house settled back into its usual quiet. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, walked into my home office, and opened my laptop. I didn't feel heartbroken, which surprised me. I just felt incredibly tired. Tired of the subtle guilt trips, tired of the constant emergencies, tired of being the silent foundation they kept building their lavish lifestyle upon. I logged into my online banking and pulled up my checking and credit card statements for the last 12 months. I grabbed a yellow notepad and a red pen. It was time for a complete audit. I started writing. Item 1. Sarah's family cell phone plan. $185 a month. Item 2. Greg's business internet upgrade. $90 a month. Item 3. The twins' private soccer coaching. $300 a month. The list grew. I found the auto-renewing premium streaming bundles. The monthly grocery delivery service they claimed was a lifesaver. The supplemental car insurance policy they forgot to transfer to their own account 3 years ago. The bi-weekly house cleaning service I covered when Sarah was pregnant and never stopped paying for. By the time I reached the bottom of the page, my hand was cramping. I counted the red lines. 27. I was making 27 recurring payments for 2 fully employed adults who had just stood in my kitchen and accused me of wasting my own money. The total came out to just over $2,400 a month, nearly $30,000 a year, the exact cost of my sunroom. I picked up my mug. The tea was cold, but the clarity in my mind was razor sharp. They were worried about their future. Fine. It was time they started funding it themselves. I clicked the first account on my screen and hit cancel. I didn't cancel everything on the first night. I wanted to be methodical. I started with the luxury. I logged into the streaming platform and changed the password, then removed their profiles entirely. I called the grocery delivery service and removed my credit card, replacing it with a polite note on their account that said, "Please update payment method." Next went the cell phone plan. I marched down to the local carrier store the following morning. I ported my number to a single-line senior plan and instructed the clerk to uncouple the other 4 lines. They'll get a text message letting them know they have 48 hours to assume billing responsibility, ma'am. The young man behind the counter explained, tapping his tablet. Perfect. I smiled. Send it. When I got home, I called the contractor for the sunroom. Let's move forward, I told him over the phone. I'll be writing a check for the deposit today. The first ripple hit the pond at 6:15 p.m. I was watering my hydrangeas when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sarah. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, she texted Mom, Netflix logged us out. What's the password? I slid the phone back into my pocket and moved the hose to the roses. 10 minutes later, another text. Mom, AT&T just sent Greg a weird message about our data plan being suspended. Call me back. I finished my watering, coiled the hose neatly, and went inside to wash my hands. I poured myself a glass of iced tea and sat on the back porch, visualizing exactly where the new glass walls of my sunroom would go. The phone buzzed a third time. I finally picked it up. Hello, Sarah. Mom. Finally. She huffed, her voice tight with annoyance. Something is wrong with your credit card. Everything is bouncing. I took a slow sip of my tea. Nothing is bouncing, honey. I'm just taking your advice. My advice. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded, the irritation in her voice peaking. You told me I needed to be sensible about my spending. I answered calmly, watching a robin land on the fence. You said I was draining your future. So I sat down and looked at my budget. You were absolutely right. I found a lot of unnecessary leaks. Leaks, she echoed. In the background, I could hear the twins shouting and Greg muttering about the Wi-Fi. Yes, 27 of them to be exact. I've gone ahead and canceled my financial support for your household. I want to make sure my money stays where it belongs. The silence on the line was profound. It lasted a full 10 seconds before her brain caught up with my words. Wait. You canceled the phones and the groceries. Panic started edging out the annoyance. Mom, Greg's car insurance draft is tomorrow. You can't just cut us off without warning. I'm not cutting you off, Sarah. I'm stepping back. You and Greg make 6 figures combined. You'll be fine once you adjust your lifestyle. Adjust our mom. This is ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum because I told you not to buy a stupid glass room. I already paid the deposit on the sunroom. Sarah, I replied, my voice perfectly level. And I'm not throwing a tantrum. I'm balancing my checkbook. Have a good evening. I hung up before she could formulate a scream. I didn't block her number, but I did silence her notifications. That night, I slept better than I had in 5 years. No tossing, no turning, no worrying about whether Sarah's mortgage was covered this month. But I knew the storm was just gathering. Tomorrow, Greg's golf club dues were going to bounce, and they wouldn't take it quietly. They didn't even knock. At 8:30 the next morning, the front door rattled, the lock clicked, and Sarah and Greg marched into my hallway. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, reading the morning paper with a cup of black coffee. Greg was flushed, his jaw tight. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept. Give me the paper, Lorraine, Greg demanded, stopping in the center of my living room. He didn't use mom. He tried to physically tower over me, puffing out his chest, the way men do when they want to substitute size for authority. I didn't flinch. I slowly folded the newspaper, set it on the coffee table, and looked up at him. You're tracking mud on my rug, Greg. Step back. He blinked, clearly thrown by my tone, and instinctively took a half step backward. How could you do this? Sarah cried, dropping her designer handbag onto the sofa. The soccer academy called me. Greg's club sent him an embarrassing email about a declined card. Do you know how humiliating this is? I imagine it's quite embarrassing to realize you can't pay your own bills in your 30s. I agreed pleasantly. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan, pulled out the neatly folded yellow notepad paper, and placed it on the table. "What is that?" Greg snapped. "An itemized list of your life, sponsored by me," I said. 27 recurring payments. From your premium sports channels to your wife's meal kits. Take it. It will help you build your new budget. Sarah snatched the paper. Her eyes darted down the list, her face shifting from angry red to a pale, terrified white. "You tracked all of this," she whispered. "I paid for all of this," I corrected her. "Until yesterday." Greg leaned forward, pointing a finger at me. "You're going to log back in and fix this, Lorraine. Right now. We don't have the liquid cash to cover this month's shortfall." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "No. No." Greg echoed, his hand dropping to his side. "What do you mean? No, Sarah is your daughter, and you are her husband," I replied. "Provide for her." Sarah crumpled into the armchair opposite me, the yellow paper trembling in her hand. "Mom, please." "We just booked a vacation to Cabo with Greg's parents. The deposit drained our checking account. We literally don't have the cash for the twins' daycare next week if we have to pay the insurance and the phones." "Then cancel Cabo," I suggested mildly. "We can't cancel Cabo. Greg's parents would judge us," Sarah shrieked, finally showing her true priorities. It was always about how things looked to his family. I stood up, picked up my empty coffee cup, and walked toward the kitchen. They followed me like lost ducklings. "You're being vindictive." Greg spat, his confidence crumbling into desperation. "This is emotional abuse." I stopped at the counter and turned to face them. "Let's get something straight. You came into my house, insulted my financial choices, and told me I was spending your future. You made it clear my money is just an inheritance you're waiting to collect. I am simply removing myself from your payroll." Sarah's keys were sitting on the kitchen island where she had tossed them when she walked in. My house key, a bright brass one with a square head, dangled on the end of her keychain. While Greg sputtered out another excuse about the economy, I quietly reached over, unclipped the brass key, and slipped it into my pocket. "What are you doing?" Sarah gasped. "Taking back my access," I stated. "From now on, you knock. If you want to visit me as my daughter, my door is open. If you're coming to demand money, don't bother making the drive. Now both of you get out of my house." The contractor is coming at 9 to measure the patio. For 7 days, I didn't hear a single word from Sarah. I knew her tactics. When she didn't get her way in high school, she would give me the silent treatment, assuming the withdrawal of her affection would eventually break me. She thought I would sit by the phone agonizing over the distance and eventually call her with an apology and an open checkbook. She severely underestimated how much a widow appreciates peace and quiet. I spent the week thriving. The contractor broke ground on the sunroom, the rhythmic thud of hammers, feeling like a heartbeat returning to the house. I drove to the garden center and bought 3 new ferns. I hosted my book club on Tuesday afternoon, serving expensive wine and imported cheeses without a single pang of guilt. I checked my bank accounts daily, not to see what they were spending, but to watch my own balance stay perfectly steady. It was exhilarating. On the 5th day, I saw a post on Sarah's social media, a picture of her looking stressed in her expensive kitchen captioned, "Some people really show their true colors when things get tough. Family is supposed to support you." I smiled, liked the photo, and scrolled past it. I knew the silent treatment was a ticking clock. The first of the month was approaching. That meant the mortgage, the HOA fees, and the private preschool tuition were all colliding at once. Without my $2,400 cushion absorbing the shock of their daily expenses, their checking account was going to hit a brick wall. On the 7th evening, the sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across my torn-up backyard. I was sitting by the window reading a mystery novel when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Sarah's name. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Mom. Her voice was raw, stripped of all the arrogant polish she usually carried. Hello, Sarah. How are the twins? I asked, keeping my tone light and conversational. They're fine, she choked out, followed by a sharp intake of breath. She was crying. Real tears, this time not the performative ones she used to manipulate Greg. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about what I said about the sunroom. It's your house. You deserve it. Thank you, Sarah. I'm really looking forward to it being finished. A heavy silence stretched across the line. She was waiting for me to step in to offer the rescue she had been trained to expect. When I didn't, she cracked. Mom. Our daycare payment failed today, she sobbed. The center won't let the boys return on Monday unless the balance is cleared. And Greg's car payment bounced. The bank sent a final notice. That sounds very stressful, I murmured. It is. We have absolutely nothing left in checking. We had to pay penalties on the phone lines and the insurance. Mom, we're drowning. Please. I know we were wrong. Can you just cover the daycare this month? Just this once. I promise. We'll pay you back. I looked out the window. The wooden frame of my new sunroom was standing strong against the evening breeze. I thought about the decades I spent sacrificing my own comfort to ensure she never felt a bump in the road. I had paved her life with my money, and it had turned her into an adult who couldn't walk on rough terrain. Sarah, I said softly. Yes, Mom. Please, whatever you want, just help us. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 30 years of mothering shift on my shoulders. No, no. The word hung in the air, fragile and disbelieving. Mom, the boys won't have daycare. I'll have to miss work. I'll lose my job. You won't lose your job, Sarah. You'll figure it out, I said, my voice steady, completely devoid of anger. You have a closet full of designer handbags. Greg has $3,000 worth of golf clubs in the garage. You have 2 luxury SUVs. Sell one. Sell the bags. Downsize. Sell my things? She gasped as if I had suggested she sell a kidney. You want us to live like we're broke. You just let us sink. I'm not letting you sink. Sarah, I replied, staring at my own reflection in the window pane. I'm finally letting you swim. You've been standing in the shallow end your whole life, complaining about the water while I held you up. It's time you learned to float on your own. You don't care about us at all, she cried, anger flashing through the tears. You only care about yourself. I care enough about you to stop enabling you. And yes, for the first time in a very long time, I am caring for myself. I didn't wait for her to hurl another insult. I didn't need to hear Greg shouting in the background. I love you, Sarah. Call me when you've sorted out your budget, and I'll have you and the boys over for dinner. I ended the call. I didn't turn off my phone, but it didn't ring again. I walked into my bedroom, pulled a small suitcase from the closet, and started packing. The contractors didn't need me hovering for the next few days. It was time for a road trip up the coast, something Arthur and I had talked about, but never funded. I zipped the suitcase shut, feeling lighter than air. 6 months later, the sunroom was finished. It was a beautiful space, filled with my ferns, a comfortable wicker reading chair, and sunlight that warmed the hardwood floor. I spent every morning out there, drinking my coffee and watching the seasons change. Sarah and Greg didn't lose their house, though I know it was a near thing. From what I gathered through the family grapevine, they had a miserable 3 months. Greg had to sell his golf clubs and his luxury sedan, buying a 10-year-old reliable commuter car instead. Sarah sold her bags and actually had to tell Greg's parents they couldn't afford the Cabo trip. I heard Greg's mother threw a fit, but that was no longer my circus, and those were no longer my monkeys. They had to sit down, face their actual income, and live within it. Sarah eventually called me on Thanksgiving, not to ask for money, but to ask how to make my stuffing recipe. Her voice was cautious, stripped of the entitlement that used to coat every word. She came over a week later, bringing the twins. She knocked on the front door. When I let her in, she looked around the house, her eyes lingering on the new sunroom. She didn't make a snide comment. She just watched her boys run out to look at the glass and smiled a small, tired smile. "It looks beautiful, Mom," she said quietly. "Thank you," I replied, handing her a cup of tea. "We still have the long way to go. I don't see her as often as I used to, but the time we do spend together is real. She isn't visiting an ATM anymore. She's visiting her mother." I took my tea into the sunroom and sat in my chair. I looked at the glass, the plants, and the clear blue sky above. I had spent decades trying to buy my family's future, only to realize that true love sometimes means closing the bank account and letting them earn their own. And the view, it was worth every single penny. You know, looking back, the hardest part of this whole journey wasn't canceling those payments or dealing with the angry phone calls. It was unlearning the idea that being a good mother meant being a permanent safety net. For so long, I confused financial rescue with love. But I realized that keeping someone comfortable while sacrificing your own peace isn't truly helping them. It's just delaying their reality check. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you've stopped caring. Sometimes it means you finally care enough to let them find their own strength. We spend our whole lives working hard to build a foundation, and it's okay to actually enjoy the house that sits on it. You don't have to apologize for claiming your own peace. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to make the difficult choice to set financial boundaries with the people you love, I would truly love to hear your experiences in the comments below. We can all learn a lot from each other's journeys. If you want to hear more stories about real-life setting boundaries and taking back control, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep sharing these moments with you. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace, and I'll see you in the next video.